Hello, everyone. Recently, the New York Times had a front page piece on global warming. And in contrast from a year ago, where the Times was riddled with problems with its explanation of global warming as something that could have been prevented back in the 1980s, um, this received a lot of backlash from not just political critics, but also from scientists who didn't understand the basis. And certainly I was around in the 80s and 90s, and the talk about global warming and climate change was a pretty minuscule topic at the time. Um, Today it seems to have been raised much higher. The stakes seem much higher because now we're seeing a lot of evidence of it. Um, put, as we see with the droughts, the fires, the floods, severe weather. Certain examples of this is that um, the carbon in the atmosphere has been this high since 800,000 years ago. Um, the rate in which 3 inch per hour rainfall occurs has never been experienced as much as it is today in the world. Um, we've seen the fires and droughts plaguing Europe, heat waves in India and Japan that are record breakers, and of course the fires in California. There are other factors that are inclusive in this. We do have more people encroaching in hazardous zones. That's particularly a factor in California, where many homes are built in the forests and are subjected to fires more readily. But not all of it is quite that simple. Uh, we do know that in my lifetime, the sea level rise has been about 3 inches. The um, the failure of crops in places like in Central America, where drought has been really hard on the people there, displacing a lot of people. And we can say that there are refugees coming from Central America, not just for the violence, but also because it's very hard to earn a living with crops that are failing because of drought. Um, and we, the Times did a piece on uh, the wave of ecological migration, mainly from areas from 30 degrees north and 30 degrees south in the planet, where the where drought and the uninhabitable conditions for humanity are going to increase over the next century. But we're already seeing its effects now. So this kind of falls on deaf ears for the most part. Uh, we seem more concerned about Trump's alleged affairs. We're more concerned about the things that are unattainable. And I'm going to make a comparison between global climate change and egalitarianism. We have a situation where we want to see a positive change that is absolute. We don't want to have anyone left out. We don't want to have any poverty. We don't want to have people discriminated against. Now, these are good attributes, just like we don't want the planet to succumb to heating that is going to destroy it and destroy the prospects of humanity living here. But the problem is that we look at our philosophical conjectures on these issues, and that's what they are. They're conjectures in which we want to have, we want to praise the high road that says we want to stop global warming, we want to stop racism, we want to stop all forms of poverty, we want equality for all. Okay, a lot of politicians, a lot of people are expressing these views. Fortunately, most people in the public are very aware that these are fantasies. Climate change is going to happen no matter what we do to try to mitigate it. We had to adjust to it. Just like we had to adjust to things like poverty, homelessness, crime, war, people who are set out to destroy us. There are real adversaries in the world, and they're never going to go away. We can wish them away. We can place blame on certain people for causing it, and I think most people know what I'm talking about. But that's not going to fix the problem. In fact, you're never going to fix the problem with rhetoric, with nice ideas, but you need to have a rational discussion amongst a whole group of people who will affirm certain changes to reduce the negative impacts on those. There are some people who say that capitalism was very good because it alleviated a lot of poverty. That is actually quite true. There's a lot less people living in poverty now than there ever has been. And I believe as a percentage of the world, there are more people who live with a lot more than they did 100 years ago. This is a positive development for humanity. Certainly more people have more rights and freedoms than they did 100 years ago. This is a good uh, barometer that humanity is improving. There's a problem whether or not how much that can be extended because there is a lot of opposition. Um, there's a lot of collectivism. There's a lot of people who don't accept either Western values, they don't accept the truths that are really out there that say, yes, there are people who are winning and there are some people who are losing. Just like with global warming. Some people will win, some people will lose. Some people will fit fine with it, but some people will be displaced. And the unfairness is part of life on Earth. We can protest all we want and say things are unfair, but to say that we can eliminate it is, again, fantasy. We need to live within the parameters of what God has given us here on this earth. There are limitations to what this planet can provide. There are limitations of what we as people can provide ourselves and each other. America has a lot of poverty, an awful lot of poverty, a lot of displaced people, and yet the perception is that we can allow so many people in the world to come here and prosper. Where does that come from? What rationale do you have that America can cure all the wrongs in the world that we're capable of doing, but we have certainly bad people running it that are preventing it? Certainly Obama couldn't change everything, and neither will Trump or anyone else in administration. We are humanity that is full of fallacies. We have good intentions, but we are full of fallacies because the planet we live in has a lot of um, fallacies in it. There is disease, there are destructive storms, there are heat waves and floods, and amongst that there are promises of renewal. There's the beauty of nature, there's the beauty of the human spirit and the human soul. These things coexist. We need to choose which side we want to be on and which we want to embrace. But when we embrace what is good in the world, when we try to each do our part to make this world a little better, even our small part, we're doing all that we can. But we cannot insist that it's going to completely change the world because we know that death comes. We know that suffering exists, hunger, pain, disease. We can't get rid of these things. We have to live with it. And the problems in the world are reminders that we as a people are not our own gods. And that's often enough we need to have some kind of solace in our own heart that, there is a better world after our life here on earth. Or we can have a more humanistic view that we did everything in our lives here on earth to make the world a little bit better. That we didn't just uh, bear excuses for everything that was wrong, but acknowledge the fact that these fallacies in our lives, in our world, exist regardless how much effort we put in to dismantle it. And this is a little bit of a thought that I want to bring with not just with global warming and social justice warriors who are trying to aim their goals that are unattainable, but to face the facts that we do need to live in reality. And reality is something that we see a lot less of. People are really afraid of the hard, honest truth about our lives, our world, and the people who live here. It's time for a good reckoning. It's time to finally wake up. I'll see you next time. Remember, please support me by reading the books, titles that are in the description. I appreciate it very much. See you again.